So today's mental health minute is about outcome bias, and I had to look it up. So this was sent to me by Jerry Vank, who was on the
Yep.
show a while back, and he sent this to me. So what is outcome bias? It's a phenomenon that was observed across various simulated. They did a study for applied. Oh, there you go. Uh, Outcomes of past decisions, whether good or bad, significantly sway how pilots evaluate the quality of the decision. So what this is basically saying is, as pilots, we always talk about the bag of experience versus our training, and you kind of hope that luck um, fills up. You don't have to use your luck, you can use your experience, but sometimes our experience can lead us astray. And a lot of the outcome biases are where we go back to that experience and we say, well, this is how this worked out before. This is how it'll work out next time. And we sometimes ignore the actual data that's being presented to us because we say, well, it worked out last time, it'll work out next time. Or we say it didn't work out next time, it won't work out this time. And we ignore all of the alarms or data or whatever. And this applies in life. I think as we get older and we get more experience, sometimes we think we have all the answers, and then we find ourselves in a position where we're like, well, damn, that didn't work out like I expected. Didn't work out like it did last time. And, I mean, just in flying, how many times flying the T-38 Gonky, have we taken off? This happened a lot at Eglin, actually, where we had fuel set up for Tyndall because we were used to operating in the exact same airspace. It was always the same airspace. It's just now we're going to Eglin instead of Tyndall. And one day the weather rolls in, and it was VFR, as visual flight rules. We thought it was going to be a great, beautiful day to go fly, get airborne, and all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we're IFR, instrument flight rules. We're going to fly this ILS. Well, at Eglin, that's a 20-mile pattern. And holy crap, everybody's calling emergency fuel, min fuel, because, well, it always worked out at Tyndall. Why wouldn't it work out here? And so sometimes in that case, you're sucking up seat cushion because you're like, holy crap, I'm going to run this thing out of gas. And that's probably one of the top two embarrassing ways to lose a jet is if you run yourself out of gas. It's not something I'd want to do. But I think that helps us and it hurts us. And we have to be able to recognize the difference of when our experience gives us that edge that's, hey, I've seen this before, but then I'm going to add in those external factors. I'm going to add in that data and actually make a valid decision. Or if we're just relying on that experience and ignoring all the external factors and not making a good decision based off of the reasonableness of the facts at hand. So I think that's our discussion for tonight. And also, I'll always talk about 988, Military One Source, or Veterans Assistance Hotlines, even calling 911. If you feel like, you might be a danger to yourself, or, you might be having thoughts that aren't good, don't just rely on the fact that it's always worked out before. Talk to somebody, get the actual data, find out what's going on, see if you can attack the root cause that's making you feel that way. You're not alone. There's no need to have to try to fight this alone. But Gonky, I mean, what do you think as far as, I think we're all victims of a little bit of outcome bias.
No, 100%. When I was a younger Hornet pilot and we would have guest pilots come fly with us, if they were like old experienced guys, I can't tell you how many times they're like, dude, you got to watch the Navy captain. He's got a lot of experience, but he's not going to be as receptive to he's going to rely more on his experience than he probably should, basically. And it's funny because I think we can all attest to this. Like the more experience that I gain flying airplanes, or really anything in life, I think this just naturally kind of happens. I think actually your brain is kind of wired like that. It's always looking for the easiest way to do things. And sometimes, if you're like, well, this is what's going to happen because this always happened before. I've had this experience before, despite what's right in front of me. You just setting yourself up for real problems. But yeah, I kind of think of it as like becoming an old man, just me personally, but you're muted.
Wombat.
that an outcome bias? Because the audio wasn't
Yeah.
muted.
That was just me saying wombat, which Gonky, you could have used your outcome bias and said wombat.
I didn't know if it was AI talking or if it was actually Mover, so I wanted to hold my comment. So
I think the thing where I see this, and it definitely applies to aviation, but I try to, while the vast majority of your listeners are at least interested in aviation, I think trying to apply these things to the average person who maybe could care less about aviation or is going through a hard time or something like that. I think the thing you have to watch with outcome bias is when you've been beat down a lot, and Gonky, you've been there with me through the things I've been through my whole career, my whole life, whatever it was. And it's hard when you feel like every time you try to take a step forward towards whatever it is you're working on, you get knocked down.
like
And
a
at some
negative
point,
bias.
at some point you're like, well, I know I'm not going to be able to do this. Why would I bother doing it? And that's, I think, extremely dangerous, and it takes you down to dark places. And one of the things I talked about on Instagram today, actually, because it literally just came to me, which is half of the stuff that I talk about because it just hits me and I like to share it, is I remember a story when I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, and I was playing outside my grandfather's house and I fell. And I mean, I fell hard. Like, I was bleeding, I was hurt, I was crying. I mean, in my 5 or 6 year old mind, I was dying. This was it, right? My life was over. And my grandfather, I'll never forget, he looked like a human version of Popeye. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, that is how he looked. He looked like, and he was never in the Navy, but he looked like an old Navy sailor with giant biceps. Like, I mean, it's just, he was a hard individual. And I remember him standing over me, and he'd looked at me and he said, "Stand." That's all he said. And I was like, "Well, I can't, I'm blah, blah." I mean, we have kids now, right? Like, we've been there.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, "Just stand." And for whatever reason, I stood up. He told me, he goes, "If you could stand, you have a chance. You could fight." And that always stuck with me. And I remember, and the rest of the story that I did not tell on Instagram today that I think goes to this, is when I was getting beat down in T-45s, and we've talked about it, where I got grounded because some stupid instructor thought I was too big for the jet, even though I wasn't. And I decided I was going to go run in the Texas heat whenever the skipper, XO, and OPSO were coming in and leaving work. Well, one day when I was out there, I fell. I didn't pass out, but I damn near passed out. I threw up on the side of the road. I was so dehydrated. I mean, you remember those summers. Like, it was horrible. And I was just sitting there, and that was it. I was like, this is it. My outcome bias was essentially like, I'm going to fail at this. They're going to take me out of flight training. They already have. It's just a matter of processing me out. There's no chance that I'm going to have to get my wings. It's all over. My whole life's going to come to an end. This is it. And I heard my grandfather. He's like, "Just stand." And I did. Well, the skipper of VT-22 at the time pulls up, stops on the side of the road, asked me if I'm okay. I told him I was, and he goes, "Come see me in an hour." That was the conversation of, you're going back in the jet, right? Well, how would that conversation have happened if I hadn't gotten off the ground, right?
Yeah.
But in my brain, I was done. My brain was shut off at that point, that there was no way that I could overcome this. It's because everything up to that point, air sickness. I mean, you go back to college, my 1/8 of an inch underbite where they were going to disqualify me from aviation. What? Air sickness in advance, right? Where they were doing everything they could to get rid of me. Not having any iota of aviation skill whatsoever, zero, right? No hand-eye coordination for the job. It was just pure muscle gut to try to get through this. And now this is happening. And if I had given into that outcome bias and just sat there, I'm not here right now. I don't have this career. I don't think I would have gotten that chance. So while I think it's dangerous in aviation, because you do have to be open-minded and you do have to assess whatever situation you're dealing with, no different than if you're driving down a highway and there's an accident happening in front of you, or you're in a relationship and it's falling apart. You have to assess all these things and try to be flexible enough and not get yourself locked into, well, every time not that I have this as an example. Every time my wife and I talk about this, she starts yelling at me. So why even bother bringing it up? It's like we've all been there in situations, right? Where it's like every time this happens, this is what it is. So why even bother dealing with it? Well, the negative is like it's that way too. It can really hinder you and your ability to actually accomplish what you want to accomplish. So, you know, I think we are wired that way. And I think in some aspects, it's a good thing because you learn from your experiences and you put all those, you know, like Mover kind of alluded to, the bucket of luck, bucket of skill, right? You hope that the luck doesn't run out before the skill fills up, right? That's the old aviation adage, right? And I think a lot of this comes into that bucket of skill. But I also think the flip side of this is it's dangerous because you can get yourself into a situation where you have conquered yourself in your mind and you're done. You've now gotten yourself into a situation where you're like, there's no way I can accomplish no matter what. And that's where I go back to, you know, kind of the mantra of just stand or just win today or something. Just get through this next couple seconds, man. If you can get through this next couple seconds and break that chain, you at least are still in the fight. And if you could stay in the fight, you got a chance.
All right, Douglas, you got anything to add?
You might have seen it. It's written on the side of my race car. It says, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. And that's a good lesson that you shouldn't take psychological advice from something written on the side of a race car. If it's stupid and it works, it was stupid and you got lucky.
Valid.
It's valid.
All right.
That's all I've got.
That's awesome.
All right. Awesome.